All right, welcome back to Worldy Unboxed. I'm Brandon here with Aaron. This season, we're talking about small decisions, people, and environments that shape how kids move, play, and build confidence before sports ever get serious. Today, we're joined by Joe Sorenson, who spent more than 2 decades working with youth programs and is now the Chief Operations Officer of the Boys and Girls Club of Southwest County in California. What I'm excited to get into today is the role community plays in a kid's development. Because kids don't just need activities, they need places where they feel safe, supported, and confident enough to try. Joe, thanks for joining us. I'd like to start with your story. How did you first get into working with kids in the youth development program?
Thanks for having me. This is exciting. Got started when I was actually like 16. I come from a big Hawaiian Filipino family and lots of cousins. And so whenever we had family gatherings, I was about 15, 16. And when we were out there, we'd be playing on the street. I'd be the one organizing games with them because it was just free play. And so we'd play capture the flag football, basketball. And we had a family friend at the time who was there who ran a Parks and Rec department. She said, "Hey, if you ever wanted a job, just give me a call." I called her that next day. And I said, "Yes, I do." And so I just kind of got into it. And my first job was just a rec leader at a rec department. And she said, "Oh, you're out on the field with kids, just go play." So I went out there and it was actually the most boring 2 hours of my life. I just stood there while kids were just out there. There were some kids playing soccer, some on the playground, and I just stood there supervising them. Next day I came in and I played all the games that I played with them in. Haven't turned back since. And so my goal at that point was just to run like an after school program and just be there for the rest of my life. But as you get older, you start maturing and you start realizing you want to do something bigger and better. I found the Boys and Girls Club and found that about 15 years ago. Running my own clubhouse in San Diego, down in Linda Vista, which is a tougher area in the area. So working with a lot of low-income families and kids and kind of getting a good idea what that was about. I started to find out that my niche was actually not necessarily working with kids, but working with staff and teaching them how to work with kids. And so that's kind of where it's led me here is I found bigger and better things. Being where I am now as the Chief Operations Officer, where I oversee the day-to-day operations here with our team of about 50 staff. Yeah, so that's kind of just a brief overview of where I came from.
That's pretty cool. And I actually have a background, not specifically in the Boys and Girls Club, but definitely in the after-school program. So my dad, growing up, he was a minister, but we also did some after-school care. Still does it through like a foundation. And so definitely remember a lot of my early childhood being spent at the Boys and Girls Club. We called it that as well. I'm not sure if it's affiliated, but it was an opportunity to really just kind of interact with kids my age. I remember a ton of sports, mostly sports, but there was a lot of other, some really good aspects of it. So really cool to kind of hear your involvement because it really does track with a lot of my my early childhood experience. But what really has like kept you in it so long? You've already mentioned that you've been a COO of the Boys and Girls Club for over 15 years, or over 15 years is when you kind of started working with them.
Yeah, so I actually got this position as a Chief Operation Officer about, I think we're at 8 years now, 7, 8 years. And so no, it was probably about 9, 10 years ago. I hit a point where I was like, I wanted more. And in the last organization I was at with in San Diego, they were a fantastic organization, but I could not get into this role where I got to oversee the entire operations. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the fire. I wanted I wanted every phone call coming my way. I wanted to be in charge of everything, but they couldn't give that to me there, and that was okay. And then this one opened up, which was actually in the town I live in Temecula, California. And so got blessed to get to work in the community that I live in, and being part of that has just been fantastic. So yeah, I kind of found my way here.
One of the things you also mentioned is I think you said you train people who work with kids. So you used to work with kids. Now you kind of work with people who work with kids. What does that training look like? What do a lot of people not necessarily get right when it comes to working with or coaching or supporting kids?
Great question. And I think one of the big things people think is when they think of after school care, they think, oh, they're babysitters. And so that's actually an insult to our industry. We call them youth development professionals. And it's not like when you go to a sandwich place and I'm a sandwich artist. That's great. But youth development professionals are an actual title that we really want to shape those kids. And so we like to shape the way kids are outside of school. So we're not teachers by any means. We don't lecture kids. We don't do history assignments, math. We don't do any of that. We supplement everything that they do in school and what they don't do. And so the first and most basic training we work with them is just how to run a group of 20 kids and keeping them engaged hour after hour. So for example, we just started summer camp here just a couple of days ago. And we went through a couple of trainings last week with a lot of new seasonal staff or some of our regular staff, and just how to run a group over an hour. And because you can do like my example's always been, if you stand there and just watch kids, yes, easy money, but it also is going to be very boring, and your 4 hour day will seem like a 12-hour day because you're just sitting there staring. So we teach them techniques like attention getters. So when I say this, you do this, and the kids get quiet, and then you jump into the activity, going over the expectations, stopping the game, adding new variations, making it fun. So what a simple game of red light, green light, you could turn it into some massive event if you do it right. And so I was always taught you could make a game of picking up dog poop out in the park a fun game if you do it right. And not the greatest example because it's very hard to get excited about that, but if you are good, anybody could make a group of 20 kids have a great time.
That's very, very cool. And it almost reminds me of the Tom Sawyer book when he talks about whitewashing the fence and making that an exciting thing. At least
Yeah.
kids are seeing it as being exciting. And it ends up being a situation where they help him get his chores done. And I think they end up paying him to do his chores. And so, not that we're going to try to see if we can get kids to try to pay each other to pick up dog poop, but I think it's a really cool to use that kind of creativity. Is that something that you are more or less letting the kids decide, or is this something that is structured through the coordinators at the program?
So we start with the staff. We let them start that process, and we want to set that consistent structure where they do, all the regular activities, what we do. But then we start in letting kid input come in because that's actually incredibly important, especially in the older and the tweens and teenagers. Getting their input is vital because tweens and teens, they could walk anytime they wanted to. They don't necessarily have to be here unless their parents are forcing them. And that's such a crucial age. So there's a piece where, yes, we'll do our scheduled activities because this is what the parents are paying for, but we also want kid input from time to time as well.
Right on. And so, and kind of switching it up and thinking about it from like a movement, like a sports perspective, how do you think about movement and healthy lifestyle for kids who may not see themselves as athletes?
That's interesting because this is kind of an area we're trying to hit right now.
Hmm.
An area of focus is because you have those kids that are just starting sports, and so they go to t-ball and they do the pee-wee football, and it is not even sports. It's just a bunch of kids running around with jerseys on, basically, right? And then you have the club kids. And I'm talking club sports, kids that are parents pay lots of money to be there every day, multiple practices. They're basically professional athletes now. The way even when I go out there and try to play with some of these club kids, it's ridiculous. And but then you got that demographic where those kids that, oh, I want to play, but I'm not that good, but I really want to play, but I don't want to jump in and just sit the whole time. So that's kind of where we come in. We actually developed a program a couple of years ago, and it's called our Club Olympics. And it's for these kids basically to participate in a day of competitive sports from all of our locations that don't necessarily get the opportunity to do this. And so that we give out medals for kids that we do soccer, basketball, track. We do e-sports actually. For those kids that are not athletic and they maybe couldn't make it onto the soccer team, but they could play e-soccer and do, sports like that. So it's just a way of just building their confidence in a way to make them realize, is this what you want or is this just something you love? And if it's something you love, you could still do it here with us. But if it's something you want, there's other avenues you could take. And so trying to, fill that gap right there is a big piece for us. Also looking at different things like backyard sports, cornhole. I'm an avid cornhole player and I love playing competitively for fun. We got a pickleball that's hot. Doing those things as well and showing kids, hey, look at these other sports. It may not be as sexy as basketball, not the Spurs and the Knicks right now, but then you got these other sports here that is something you could do. It's still competitive. It's great for you and it keeps you moving.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then kind of going to the creativity piece and how you are encouraging staff to figure out ways to get these kids involved who may or may not be like, okay, this sport's not necessarily for me. But then you try to think upon in unique ways to make it cool, or offering different sports that they might not be thinking or considering, even the esports category. In terms of that balancing between making it really fun and really unique and really creative, and then the structure of sports, especially when we were just talking about the kids who are playing at the club level, and there are many professional athletes, especially in this day and age with the NIL going lower and lower in terms of the age demographic. What is the balancing that you see or you hope to see between structure and fun?
Well, the two things that we focus on our staff is the first one is safety.
Hmm.
Foundation of everything we do is safety. Like whenever time I walk up to one of my clubs and I walk in, my mind is on safety. I was picking up some trash on the way, and some of it was some questionable trash. Went to go wash my edges. Like I don't want kids touching this, so picking it up, throwing it away. But then the second thing is fun. I want to walk in, and it's hard to measure fun, but you could feel it, right? And so when I walk in, I want to feel it. And so I walked in. Just give you an example. I walk in right now to one of my clubhouses here in Temecula, and I was just walking around, and there was a group playing indoor balloon volleyball with some first and second graders, and there's some furniture in there that were playing around it, and that game can get a little dicey if you're not running it right. But this she was running it so good. She actually opened the door to ask a question to one of the supervisors here, and the game started to spill out. Like the balloon came out, and the kids went running out for it as well. But they were all engaged in it, and she was able to still structure it in such a way to bring them back in. And so when we're talking about how do we focus on this, it's always safety first, then fun. And the fun can very easily be incorporated into the safety aspect of it. And so when we get into like older kids, like we have some club soccer kids that come here, and when we go out there and play soccer, it's all about splitting them up and just setting expectations for the group, and then almost pulling them aside and saying, "Hey, these kids aren't club kids. Get them involved. You don't have to score every goal. How many assists can you get? Can you focus on something else today?" And for the most part, if the staff has developed a good relationship with these kids, it's not an issue whatsoever.
That's awesome. And I think about the balloon volleyball. I play like a variant of that with my girls, and it's I think it's called Keepsy Upsy on Bluey or whatever calls it
Yeah, yeah.
Keepsy Upsy. I don't know. It's something along those lines. And it can get dicey. There's some furniture that gets like thrown around. It's everything is kind of competitive in the Ward household, but yeah, I think that balance between structure and fun is certainly something that parents should be cognizant of. And I say parents because I'm thinking about myself. And I have my girls in the rec league, and they play soccer, and I played the sport, maybe not as well as Aaron growing up, but I played it enough to where I'm like, I can live vicariously through them a little bit. And you really want them to have fun. You really want them to enjoy the sport, but you also kind of want to see them be successful in it. And so you're really pushing them like, hey, I really want you to pass it this way, or look for a teammate in this situation, or be aggressive when you're getting around the goal so that you can kick it in. So I think it's also something that becomes a balancing act for parents as well. What should parents be focusing on before sports get serious, while they're still in that stage where you really just want them to love the game? You really want them to experience the joy of it, the same joy that we had just playing with almost no rules. But you also want to see them grow and mature in that sport, or whatever it might be. What should parents kind of focus on, or what suggestions would you say should be good focal points for parents?
Well, this is me. I don't necessarily know how this works for everybody, but it's like when you watch, I watch a lot of Food Network and cooking shows. And, one of the things that they do now on cooking shows than they did like 10 years ago, this is what happens when you get older. You just start watching cooking shows or DIY hardware shows. And it's weird, but I love watching cooking shows. And one of the things I've always loved about this, and I translate this to our work as well, is that when they make a food, they connect it to their youth or their past. And they're like, oh, that smell is so reminiscent of my grandma cooking when I would come over. And this is why this meal is so important to me. And so for my kids personally, my kids aren't really athletic kids, sports kids. I grew up in a sports family. And so my son, who is 17 next week, just recently in the last 6 to 9 months got into sports, football, hardcore, soccer, and basketball all at once. And so I've been taking him to go play basketball. And so when I'm showing him the game and teaching him about the love of basketball, I'm connecting it to when I was a kid. I said, hey, so, this is what I used to love to do. I used to love to come stand under the basket. I would shoot 10 shots in a row and swish them before I would move out to the 3-point line. And you know why this worked? It was because it got me rhythm. It got me comfortable. It got me feeling good for my shot before I started shooting that sexy shot out there. And because it's not sexy if you're not, and I would tell him this, but connecting it to as a kid, or saying, what I would do is, this is going way back, I put my Walkman on when I was in 5th grade, and I would play music, and I would practice like I was always hitting the buzzer beater going, and never for the NBA finals. It was always for the Final Four or the NCAA championship game, because there was something always so magical about that. And so I would put him in those moments as well. And so he's starting to get into that mindset of, this is what sports is about. And so even here with the kids, it's about that. It's about creating that love for what we have and trying to give it to them. But then at the same time setting that structure. It's one of those things, like I tell my staff, structure is so important and key in this because the reason why kids love video games so much, because obviously it's another world, but it's because they have structure and boundaries. If you go outside that structure or boundary, you die and you have to start over. That's why they love it. It's so you got to have that structure and boundary. If you have it a free for all, it's not a game, it's not a sport, it's not anything. So yeah, I mean, if I'm talking to somebody, it's figuring out where you found the love for whatever that sport is and figuring out how to translate it to who it is there.
Yeah, that's good. I think that makes total sense. And there are a lot of times where I have grown up playing a game or a sport that lacked structure. And I realized really quickly that we're not actually playing some sort of game. We're just on. And this is most of the time when my sisters were just creating rules as they went along. We're just on one of their fantasy quests, and it's something that's not going to materialize into anything. So, kind of switching gears again and thinking about potential and maybe kind of referencing a little bit of what you said earlier about how kids find themselves saying, I don't really like, that's not for me. Like, that's not what I desire to do. I'm not a soccer player or basketball player or football player, etc. But then there are other things out there that they may not have had exposure to, like esports, like pickleball, or things that are just a little bit not mainstream. So, what kind of barriers do you see kids, maybe in the areas that you're in, that families are kind of facing and people are kind of overlooking? I don't know. Maybe there's a better way of framing that question, but what kind of barriers do you see to these different sports that families are facing?
Well, if you're thinking, like, if you're talking Boys and Girls Club, like
Yeah.
one of our focuses is opportunities for kids. And so we try to bring those. And that's one of our selling points to parents when they're worried about where to put them. We're like, these are opportunities that aren't just out there. We provide all of these things that specialty camp to do. And these are meant for all kids, especially those that need it most. But the biggest barrier for a lot of our families when they're trying to get into these things is it's two things. And it's usually financial, the cost. And even if they can make it work, we have families that work 12, 13 hours a day, and they're a single parent, and they have three boys, and they want their kids. They're all athletic kids. They want to get involved, but mom can't get off work before 6:30 because she needs every hour of that paycheck to go into rent for food for the kids. And so we just had a talk with her, this parent specifically a couple months ago, and she was saying that is, I just can't get my kids into sports. And that's the hardest part right now is because they're lacking that structure of sports. There's been some behavioral problems on the flip side of that, which I think people don't realize that's how important sports are in keeping kids focused on a bigger picture in life as well. So I think for us in my industry, that's what you see the biggest barrier. In this area, there's lots of opportunity for families to do that. But, if it's a working family who has multiple jobs, single parent, or both parents are working even just to survive week to week, that's the biggest barrier right now.
And maybe you've already kind of answered it, but what is one barrier that is easier to solve than, I guess, people or families think?
Well, I think the easiest one is for us right now is creating that internal sports program for those families. And so we've already, like on my team right now, we're exploring, we're kind of in that test phase right now where is how do we bring a sports program effectively to our families? And it's competitive. It's there. It's there to get them off the ground, to get those kids the opportunity to be there. But, how do we do it within the hours that we're already open and that for the parents that can't get their kids here? So that's kind of where we are right now, is trying to eliminate that barrier for them. And so we have calls out to some of our local partners that run these things. And we just want to know, what are the hardest part? What's the easiest part? How can we take that and make it work for us?
Just kind of talking about maybe challenges that the organization kind of faces. What are some of the challenges to be able to kind of accomplish these missions, which are really awesome? What are some of the challenges from an organizational standpoint that you're kind of like realizing?
I think it's funny how it changes from year to year, but for the
Mhm.
most part, the biggest one, I can speak for a lot of nonprofits, it's always financial. We don't make money. Everything we get gets put back into what we do. We provide scholarships, financial assistance to a lot of families. And But we don't have like a pool of money sitting there. We're always raising the money to make sure those kids have a safe place to go every single day. So in our area, Southwest Riverside County, it's not a big major metro. It's not LA. It's not San Diego. We're right in the middle of both of them. So the donor base is a little thinner than you would see. And we're competing with over 1,000 other nonprofits to build relationships and increase funding. So that way we can constantly increase programs. So it's about that. It's about working with local school districts. We have great partnerships with a couple of our school districts here and getting onto school campuses and providing this care for families that need it. So it's always going to be financial. That's usually the biggest barrier as an organization. But where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I think the financial piece is definitely something I just from again like my experience with the Boys and Girls Club, it was donation based, so it was something that was solely based upon donation dollars. And from that aspect, I just kind of remember on the back end as a kid seeing the creativity in the back scene that would have to take place in order for us to continue to pursue that mission. So no, I definitely feel you on that. That is a big barrier.
So I'm not a parent, but I have a similar mindset to Brandon. Brandon was talking a little bit before about if you have a kid, you want them to have fun, but at the same time, you're kind of living vicariously. You want them to achieve. So I think there's a lot of parents who are first-time coaches who have that kind of sports and competitive background. What advice would you give to them in terms of coaching kids for the first time and trying to strike that balance between teaching them the game, having fun, and I guess instilling a little bit of competition and some other values from sports that you might not get in other areas of life?
It's just have fun. I know it's like it sounds. There's probably more strategic ways to come about saying that, but it's just go have fun. I mean, there's a lot of, and I know some personally that coach their kids and they get way too intense into it. But I mean, it's just about at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about those kids and their development. And you could have fun with them and be competitive at the same time, but don't take it as serious as you should. And if a kid's having a tough time with it, bring it back to what's more important at this point. And when I kind of talked a little bit about our Club Olympics, we have medals for first, second, third, all of that. But the biggest award we give out, and we make this a big point, and it's a giant trophy. It's our sportsmanship award, and it goes to the club that displays the best sportsmanship throughout the day. And we give them examples of what it looks like, and then we have secret voters, and they go around. And so that kind of brings the competitive up here, but it still keeps it fun and focused on what's the major mission. It's just about being good people. So, but it's also hard. It doesn't matter who you are or how you are as a parent. If you are who you are and you're an ultra competitive person, you're not thinking about the fun. You just like the passion and the exhilaration of competition. That's the other part of it.
Have you ever had a conversation with one of those parents who's way too intense and say like, hey, you need to chill out? Or have you just kept that to yourself?
Yeah. Luckily, this was a while ago, but it was in one of the sports leagues at our organization, and I oversaw that location. And, one of the directors is like, hey, I'm having trouble with this parent. He's yelling at the refs. He's yelling at his kids on the court, getting almost to the verge of being physical. He's already been kicked out of a game. What do I do? And I said, well, I think it's time to have that discussion. So I go, I have the discussion. I say, if this continues, this is about the kids. This isn't about you. And if this is too much for you, if this is giving you this kind of energy, this might not be the right volunteer position for you. And so he calmed down for the rest of the season. He was fine, but it was just that discussion. It's just like, is this the right energy for you? Do you really want to feel this way coaching third grade basketball? And if that's the case, then maybe you just need to stick to the stance. And so we had that face the hard fact discussion, and he was fine after that, but I never had it go to a point of physicality with me or anything, thankfully.
Yeah, that's good.
Kind of thinking about the effects or the impacts of the program and being able to see that or witness that in kids. What are some signs that you see that like, hey, we're really reaching this kid? They've changed. They've really matured in large part because of your program. What are some signs that you're like, okay, we're getting through?
Yeah. I mean, there's different ways to look at it. My very first program I ran after school, we ran dodgeball every single day. And we named it something different, but it was literally dodgeball, but it was a special kind of dodgeball, real creative. And we had some super athletic kids in this program and some not so athletic. And speaking to the not so athletic kids, there was one kid specifically at the end of the year. He was the last kid left in the game. And we had this variation in the game that all these different colored balls, but there was one that was white, and we called it the white ball. If you ever caught the white ball, it brought everyone back into the game. And so his last kid left. He was always one of the worst dodgeball players, but he'd been playing all year. He kept focusing. We had drills. We would teach them how to throw and how to catch and how to dodge. And he was the last one left. They threw all these balls at him. He dodged the first 4 or 5, and somebody threw the white ball at him, knowing that he wouldn't catch it. He caught it, brought everybody in. You had never seen any emotion from this kid. He took the ball, threw it up in the air. Yeah. And these kids came in. They ended up winning the game. They actually picked him up, put him on his shoulders. But just to see like that type of from him was fantastic. And then it actually in that same group of kids, I don't know if you, the leading rusher for NCAA football, DJ Pumphrey, Donnell Pumphrey, he went to San Diego State. He was youth in one of my programs. And I remember when we were playing Capture the Flag, he got to the other enemy territory, grabbed the flag, and this is before I knew he played football, and he dodged 25 kids in a span of like 50 feet without getting his flag taken off. But he looked like Barry Sanders. This was the wild thing. I think me and my team were like, this is the next big thing right here. We literally said this. We're like, this is the next big thing. Talk to his mom. Mom's like, oh yeah, he scores 6 touchdowns a game in Pee Wee football right now. He can't be beaten. And but yeah, then you see that, and then you see a kid like that now, and where he is now, and he's coaching kids himself. And yeah, it's a great feeling, and it's just about constantly, because kids have to keep hearing it. Constantly praising, constantly coaching, constantly 1% improvement every day, and just focusing on that with them every day.
No, that's very cool. And yes, I've definitely heard of them. And yeah, that's crazy to kind of see that. And you see that now with kids in the era of like, everything's being posted on YouTube and socials and stuff, and you'll see them at a very early stage. So yeah, he probably had some skills growing up at that level.
Yeah.
I guess from a cultural standpoint, how have you seen the culture either grow and mature alongside all the kids who are kind of coming through the program? You said you've been there for about, over a decade, about 15 years. Like, how have you seen the culture kind of shift, and how has that been a benefit, or hopefully a benefit to the process?
I think, well, and I hate referencing it because I feel like everyone references it, and I don't like using this, but it's COVID. When COVID hit, that was a big cultural shift in everything we had to do. And this is everybody, it wasn't just us. But I mean, we went from serving a couple of 100 kids a day at each of our 3 locations at the time to when we opened back up, we could only allow 50 kids in there, and it was a 5-to-1 ratio. So staffing costs went through the roof, everything. And we couldn't even play sports because they had to keep 6-foot distancing. And so you're talking about the social aspect, the physical aspect, the competitive aspect, all kind of went out the window. And so that was the biggest shift, because nothing had really changed in terms of after school program until that hit. But then once that happened, you saw a huge, and you're still feeling the effects of it, and especially with literacy. A lot of those COVID kids, those kindergarten, first graders that were home for those first year, they're now in middle school, and there's a big decline in, schooling. But even in sports, they just didn't have because they were not doing sports for that year. A lot of those kids never got into it like they should have. And so that was probably the biggest shift that we saw was coming out of that. It was like 2 years lost essentially for kids' development.
Yeah, that was certainly impactful. I remember doing law school fully remote. We were actually in San Diego.
Wild.
Yeah. It's nuts. It definitely has an impact. And even if it was like a relatively short period of time, you're talking a couple of years when they were instituting these types of policies, it has some lingering impacts. And even like on my day to day, I probably wouldn't be sitting here working from home had it not been for the COVID experience. So no, that is certainly something that can have a huge impact.
Well, and I mean, on the flip side of it, though, it kind of taught us as youth development professionals to be more thoughtful in our process, have a more trauma-informed approach towards things. And so from that side, and I think that's where there's been a big shift with our team, is just being even more connected with the kids more than ever, and kind of understand where they're coming from has been the biggest positive for us as employees.
For sure. I think there were a lot of learnings that kind of came out of that, and definitely something that I still go through today. So no, I get it. As we get closer to wrapping things up, for listeners who kind of listen to this at 2.5x speed, what are the main points or some of the things that you want people to take away from this conversation?
In relation to like sports
Or
and
anything in
just
general,
anything.
anything that we kind of
Oh, okay.
discussed today, anything that you're like, okay, this is probably a good snapshot of like the entire conversation, some of the main points that I think are good to drive home.
I just think focusing our kids' boundaries, their structure, and just making sure they're having fun. And everything I do here, I translate back to life with my staff and my own personal kids, my family, even random people. If I walk and talk to them, they see my Boys and Girls Club shirt on. I get into it and I still talk about the same things. It's about safety, it's about fun, and our kids should be having fun all the time. And we tend to forget that. It's so crucial for their development, especially summer here with us. It's that a summer learning gap, and then for me, it's more of that emotional learning gap, and for kids being social with other kids and learning new things and competing and in low to high levels and anything, just having fun. And that's the biggest takeaway I want people to have, especially when it comes to having kids.
I think that's a really good one. And we should have said this before, but one of our slogans is that our products are engineered for maximum fun. And fun is just a big value of ours. So I like that was one of your takeaways.
So yeah, I think that's a wrap. It was great having the conversation with you today, Joe. Great meeting you. A lot of nostalgia because I remember a lot of days in the Boys and Girls Club back home. So it's cool to kind of see that being carried on. But yeah, great meeting you. Great having this convo.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
This was great. No, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.